So, how many of you have ever been in timeout? That would be me. You know, I remember when I was about your age, I would come home from school and I'd say to my mother, "Do you know what Susie did to me today?" And she'd listen to me and then she'd say, "Well, what did you do?" That made me madder because it wasn't my fault. So then, if I was really being bratty about it, she'd tell me I had to go to my room and think about what I did, which only made me madder. But then my dad would come in and he'd pull me on his lap and he'd say, "Well, now what happened?" And we'd talk about it. And then he would tell me how I could fix it. Do your parents ever do that? No? Well, I'm not talking to parents out there, but anyway. So, then I would think about what I had to do to fix it and repair it. So I'd have to go to the person that I had a fight with or I hurt, and I'd have to say, "What do you think I had to say to them?" That's exactly right. I had to say, "I'm sorry." But you know what else I had to do instead of, along with that? I had to mean it. And I had to show them that I meant it. You know how you can show somebody that you mean you're really sorry? Not do whatever you did again. Or to figure out why that hurt them. And then try to be, kind, friendly, and to think about how they feel. So I think if we can all do that, because parents need to do that too, I need to do that all the time and think, well, that's not what I meant when I said that. And we have to say, oops. Or sometimes somebody says something to us and we go, oh, ouch, that hurt. But then we have to say to them, you know what, that hurt a little bit, and I don't think you meant that. So people know that sometimes what they say can hurt just as much as what they do. So let's think about that this week, okay?
So I'm going to talk about repairing relationships. But I need to share today that last weekend, my mother, Hanju Kim, passed away from a sudden heart attack at the age of 88. I was on vacation with my wife in Portland, with my wife Blythe at the time. So Hazel was a caring pediatrician, specialized in developmental pediatrics, also a really tough New England woman with a deeply ingrained Protestant work ethic, growing up as the daughter of a factory worker in Norwood. Hup, she would shout like a drill sergeant when there were chores to get done, also even if there were sights to be seen on vacation. She was a hospital medical director in Brooklyn from age 60 to 70, learning fluent Spanish on her own to help serve that community. And at 66, she passed a new subspecialty for developmental and behavioral pediatrics. And at 71, she started a private practice for the first time in her life. Serving their community for Queens, she kept up her private practice until, for 13 years, until she was 83. She only retired because her neurologist demanded that she do so. She was not one for talking about her feelings. She's probably not the person I would suggest you go to for relationship advice. Even with her grandkids, she wasn't a big presence. She was dedicated as a mother, but she wasn't in it to help people, not necessarily to talk to them nicely. I think I'm the husband of a therapist. We can all go on about talking about our feelings. I'm doing that now. there's a certain UU-ish tendency, I think, to talk about our feelings a lot, to have a lot of meetings, a lot of maybe check-ins, a little patting ourselves on the back about how enlightened we are. But part of this that I want to emphasize is about getting down and getting the work done. And that's when we say about apologizing. Sure, we can apologize. That's great. What are you going to do about it? I've got a lot of tissues, don't worry. Being prepared and getting these things done. So, with a roommate or a spouse, there's parent relationships, you can talk about your feelings, but there are chores to get done. Washing the dishes, cleaning the bathroom, taking out the trash. With coworkers, there are joint duties. If someone needs caring for, they need time and effort taking care of them. If they're sick, make them the soup. If they're tired, help them get things done. If they're lonely, just take the time to be with them. I think that's a lot of what One Life is doing for their clients. And this includes taking care of yourself too. You, or me in my case, are the most important person that you take care of. And that's work too. Work, hop. You need time to take care of yourself. Make sure that you keep yourself away from too many stresses or distractions. A friend of mine in choir told me, if you're grieving, also take time to take care of yourself. Just don't keep up life as usual, although maybe you keep up your commitments on certain Sundays. Relationships have a lot of feelings, sure. I don't want to discount the sharing feelings. They were real and important, but it's also important to keep in mind the work that has to go into it. It's not just talking. That work won't prevent a lot of arguments with your husband or with your kids, but it will be appreciated and felt in the lives of those close to you. So, thank you.
Let's all take a breath, shall we? So, how are we all doing? It's been an emotional roller coaster since November 5th. I was pretty much involved in all the pre-election coverage, and so that by election day, I had pretty much reached the place of overwhelm. Last Christmas, I got a candle from my sister, and the label on the side said, "My last nerve. Oh, look, it's on fire." I'd run the gamut from hope and optimism to shock and dread, and then finally, grief. I know that some of you have experienced all these emotions too. I saw it at our special post-election service on November 6th. Brian and I knew that whatever the outcome of the vote, we would need time to process all the emotions that would bring it up in us, and I think we did. So now, what next? For some of you, it will be too early to think of anything but protecting yourself from what you might imagine comes next. Others of you are finding your fight again and are digging in to get involved. There's no right answer here except what feels best and works for you. Everyone processes their emotions at their own pace. But there's a real need for repair here. That's our theme for this month of November. Whoever chooses the themes for Soul Matters was very wise to foresee that we all may need to think about repair with our community in a spiritual context. Unless and until we can listen and hear why so many of our fellow citizens either voted for something we don't agree with or didn't vote at all, we're not going to repair the divisions between us. But I think these repairs have to start with each of us. I love this story from Paul Coelho's collection of stories in Like a Flowing River. A father was trying to read the newspaper, but his little son kept pestering him. Finally, the father grew tired of this, and tearing a page from the newspaper, one that bore a map of the world, he cut it into several pieces and handed them to his son. Right now, you've got something to do. I've given you a map of the world, and I want to see if you can put it back together correctly. He resumed his reading, knowing that the task would keep his child occupied for the rest of the day. However, a quarter of an hour later, the boy returned with the map. Has your mother been teaching you geography? I don't even know what that is, said his son. But there was a photo of a man on the other side of the page. So I put the man together and found I'd put the whole world together too. Yeah. But are we taking into consideration that the responses you're seeing may be a response to former trauma? UU Minister Reverend Bill Sinkford talks about the fear of driving country roads at night. He's come close to having a panic attack until he can drive into the city again. If you don't know, he's an African-American man who said that he's never had a problem on a backcountry road. So when he thought about it and why he reacts that way, he remembered a time when he was young, watching his mother drive a backcountry road in fear. This surprised him because she was a very strong woman and never backed down from a fight. That fear was a trauma response to what had happened to her years before on a backcountry road. And he realized that his fear was in response to her trauma, not of his own. Scientists have discovered that trauma is encoded into our DNA and can be passed to future generations. So whose trauma are we responding to? He believes that first we must stop the trauma and then move forward in kindness. Are we only staying in our own political bubble and purposefully avoiding people we know don't hold our views? Are we dreading holiday dinners because we know that some family members will want to talk about the new administration? I think we'll need to find small entries into conversations where we can find common ground. Last Friday, I was in Smart and Final, and I was standing in line behind a man who had a very full shopping cart. And I was just standing there waiting my turn, and he was being checked out, and he and the checker were talking about the upcoming fight. Well, fight always gets my attention, so I started to pay attention and realized he was talking about the Mike Tyson fight. So I said, "Oh, is that Mike Tyson?" And he said, "Oh, yes," and he was very excited. So we started talking about that. Somewhere in the conversation, and I don't remember where, I took a breath and said, well, this is why we have to keep talking to one another. And he stopped. The man was about 40 years old. He stopped and he said, you know, I'm a conservative, and my mother and my sister are liberals. And I can't let that get in the way of our relationship. He said, you know, I was in the military, and I know what happens when people can't talk to one another. I got very emotional at that because, as most of you know, I'm the widow of a disabled Vietnam veteran. And so veterans hold a very special place in my heart. So our military are not always looking for a fight They're looking to put them out. But they are understanding that that comes from relationships. My neighbor across the street has become a very good friend of mine. She's a widow too, and for the last 4 years, she comes over every Tuesday and Friday night, and we sit for about an hour and a half, and just chat and catch up. She and I hold different views about race, about gender, about transgender, about LGBTQ issues. And she'll tell me something that she thinks about, and then I'll say, well, you know, that's not been my experience. And then I'll tell her my experience with family members who are in same-sex marriages, my classmates and dear friends who are transgender, my relationships with dear people in my life who are of other races or religions. And she'll listen and consider what I've said. And that's because I do it without any emotion or judgment, and because we have a relationship. And because of that, she'll listen to what I have to say and consider it. And I think I've changed her mind, and she has opened me up to other possibilities. There is a study that was just done by Cornell and American University. It was to study conspiracy theories in people. And they discovered that conspiracy theories exist because people ignore evidence because those beliefs fill some psychological need. So the universities used AI to discuss these people's beliefs and then counter them with evidence. And they found after 2 or 3 rounds of this back and forth interaction, that they could significantly reduce these conspiracy theory beliefs and reduce their conspiratorial mindset. Because AI is not emotional or defensive. What can we learn from this? The subject of repair reminds me that tailors can reweave a hole in your suit jacket or sport coat. I've seen these repairs and they're amazing, but it takes great care, attention to detail, and patience. Not unlike the qualities we need to repair the relationships across the divide. But we need to be in the right place with ourselves to do the work. Are we grounded enough for entering into these tenuous conversations? Can we listen with empathy, patience, and kindness without letting ourselves get caught up in the emotion on the subject? And can we gently remove ourselves when we realize that the conversation is moving in a direction that's harmful to ourselves or others? We need to be that self-aware. And we must realize that forgiveness is a big part of this. First, forgiveness towards ourselves for missed opportunities, for times that we responded in ways that were not loving or kind, towards ourselves for being human. Then we can ask for forgiveness from others without the expectation that it will be granted, and it may never be. Self-care in the days to come will become paramount. You can't drink from an empty cup. And as I concluded at our post-election service, making sure that you're eating well, sleeping, checking in with friends, sitting in the sun, getting enough exercise, walking in silence, and brushing your teeth are our new marching orders. And we must be optimistic and realistic about what we can do to reach across the divide when we are ready. And that last part is paramount. When we are ready. I'd like to share a poem from Rosemary Watola Kimmer. So I can't save the world, can't even save myself, can't wrap my arms around every frightened child, can't foster peace among nations, can't bring love to all who feel unlovable. So I practice opening my heart right here in this room and being gentle with my insufficiency. I practice walking down the street, heart first, and if it's sufficient to share love, I will practice love always. I want to converse about truth, about trust. I want to invite compassion into every interaction. One willing heart can't stop a war. One willing heart can't feed all the hungry. And sometimes, daunted by a task too big, I tell myself, what's the use of trying? But today, the invitation is clear: to be ridiculously courageous in love, to open the heart like a lilac in May, knowing that freeze is possible, and opening anyway. To take love seriously, to give love wildly, to race up to the world as if I were a puppy, adoring and unjaded, stumbling on my own exuberance. To feel the shock of indifference, of anger, of cruelty, of fear, and stay open. To love as if it matters, as if the world depends on it. When we are depleted and discouraged, as we probably will be in the days and years to come, we need to fall back on our self-care and our Unitarian Universalist values: justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity of spirit, of heart. And at the very center of everything, love. For ourselves, our neighbors, and our country. May it be so.